Welcome in, Battlers. I'm JigglyDad, and this is my interview with Kakuna Mattata, the guy who created PvPoke. If you enjoy this interview, please check me out at twitch.tv/JigglyDad. Welcome into our guest. I think you guys probably know who this guy is, although you know him by many names. PvPoke, Kakuna Mattata. Or what would you prefer that I call you? Would you prefer I call you Matt? Is that the simplest way to go?
Matt's just fine.
So I always ask my interview subjects to give me a brief bio. I tell them I don't care how brief it is. But Matt gets a little cheeky here. He tells us, he's the developer of PvPoke, a Minnesota local, takes 5 minutes to tie his shoes. His favorite food is bratwurst, and he is a bit of a brat himself. So what is the story behind the 5 minutes to tie your shoes? Are you a meticulous sort, or is that supposed to be some self-deprecating humor? What's the?
Oh, definitely more the self-deprecating humor direction. I don't know why it takes me so long. It's just the way it is. I've gotten used to wearing slippers around the apartment now, so just slip them on. You're good to go.
Are you picky about your slippers?
The ones I have are pretty nice. Yeah, they're solid. Can't complain.
What was the origin of Kakuna Mattata? Was it just a simple play on Matt? Was that the original idea?
Yeah. I was trying to think of a punny name for my trainer, and Kakuna Mattata had been taken when I signed up, so I was like, okay, I gotta think of some numbers. So Kakuna Mattata 42. There you have it.
Oh man, so you're not even original in that regard.
I know, right?
That's kind of sad.
How dare someone think of that before me?
So how is Minnesota for Pokemon in general? And do you live kind of in an urban or suburban area?
Yeah,
rural?
yeah. I'm in a really great spot. I'm pretty close to downtown, which is bustling with Pokestops, and I'm right by the University of Minnesota campus, which is among the places to hunt for Pokemon. Tons of stops, tons of spawns, and then when it's like -20 in February, we've got the Mall of America for Community Day, so that's a great spot too.
Oh, I can only imagine, because I lived in Pennsylvania for a year, and the one thing I missed the most about there was just the fact that there was at least somewhere to go and walk with some Pokestops when it was crappy outside, and we don't have that here. So I can only imagine the Mall of America would have to be like just a Pokemon Go player's dream come true when the weather sucks.
Yeah,
and I would imagine a lot of the time when you're in Minnesota, the weather probably does suck, right?
most of the time it's your 3 seasons or 4 seasons are winter, and construction season.
Ugh, yikes. Do you have anything else that at the moment that you're really into other than Pokemon? Are you into anything else in terms of hobbies, or does this kind of take all of your free time?
Unfortunately, for all of my other hobbies, I do have a lot of hobbies, perhaps too many. So there's the whole Pokemon thing, the programming thing. I do some like fantasy and science fiction writing. I play violin.
Oh wow!
So kind of all over the place. Some art too that some people may have seen on Twitter.
What kind of art do you make? Drawings or?
It started out with like mostly landscapes,
Okay.
and I've been practicing characters and stuff. So I've been doing some Pokemon art lately, and that's been fun.
Sweet. What kind of programming stuff do you do outside of PvPoke? And I assume that was there a major project before PvPoke that you were most focused on? Are you like one of those open source kind of guys?
Well, my day job is I do web development for like an advertising agency. So I've built a bunch of websites for some small companies around town. And then before PvPoke, my project was a website called Thume.org, which is a dictionary for the dragon language of Skyrim.
Whoa.
for super nerdy stuff. Like if you thought Pokemon Go PvP was nerdy,
Holy
just
cow.
wait.
The
So that
dragon language of Skyrim. I don't think I knew that this exists. I have friends that play Skyrim, but I've never knew of this dragon language. Does it have its
yeah,
origins in another language? Was it borrowed, or was it entirely kind of like the Klingon thing where they just made it up from scratch? And
yeah, more like the Klingon thing. It's inspired by like Old Norse and stuff like that. And to be honest, from like a constructed language perspective, it's a little on the shoddy side.
uh-oh.
But yeah, you have fun with it.
Did you
And yeah,
did you like study linguistics or something when you were in school, or was it just some random project you picked up that you thought seemed
yeah.
fun?
I studied German quite a bit in high school and college, and then I got really into linguistics with the whole Skyrim thing,
Wow.
um, and making making made up languages is fun, as it turns out, for some people. If you're me,
Is it a so is it a functional, or like a is there a utility to knowing this language or to being able to use this dictionary, or is it more just like a whimsical thing where it just kind of is what it is, and you can go see what it means in that language if you go to your site?
it's an official language of some small island in the South Pacific. Not really.
No.
It's just for fun. Um, yeah, and yeah.
Oh man. So when did you when did you come up with the idea that you wanted to do PvPoke? Was it your first Pokemon related development project, or had you had some smaller things that you'd tried before? Anything just personal pet projects or anything?
There's some interesting backstory to PvPoke. I had originally, a long while back, I had started making like a Pokemon fan game, and I got really, really far with it actually. Um, to having like the core um, main series battle system built from scratch and having routes and stuff.
Wow.
It got pretty far. So that was my first like super big Pokemon project. Um, and then actually the summer before they released PvP, I did like a test fun project of actually making PvP with the current like raid gym battle system. So I made a playable um, player versus player um, emulator basically for that.
Oh wow.
And that was kind of the building blocks of where PvPoke kind of started.
Okay, so something that was kind of from scratch that's akin to like your training simulator now, where like you'd plug
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
stats for your Pokemon and you would just kind of mash buttons and see what happened.
Yeah, it was basically that. And when I went to make the training simulator, I kind of had the groundwork set up for that already.
Oh wow. So do you have anything in terms of, are you one of those people that really keeps meticulous source code from like different versions and stuff? Do you still have like what PvPoke 1.0 or like beta point 1 or whatever looked like? Do you have any like screenshots that you could show people for what PvPoke looked like on launch?
Yeah, I could. It's on GitHub, so I would just have to um, check out like the first version, and there you go. I think it was pretty bare bones. It had like the regular one Pokemon versus one Pokemon battle rankings and a pretty basic team builder.
So one of the things that I've noticed about your site that I think is probably one of the reasons that it's so successful, aside from the fact that it does so many useful things, is that you've kept like the visuals very lightweight, and it like everything just kind of seems to load fast, and it's responsive in terms like you can easily use it on your phone and on a computer. um, is that something that you focus on? Are you one of those? Do you like to just have like a super efficient website? I've never noticed, for example, like PvPoke outage where like too many people are using it and like it just chews up bandwidth because I assume there's just not a lot of bandwidth for it to chew up.
Yeah, there was one time where that happened, and that was the launch of Go Battle League,
Okay.
um, which is that was a it was a funny moment and kind of a um, like we had been waiting for it for so long that seeing that much activity was really kind of validating and exciting too. Even though it was a problem, it was a good problem to have. Um, but I did make a conscious effort of trying to uh, keep it really simple, streamlined, minimal, um, and fast, and it worked out.
So what was the response when Go Battle League launched and you had an outage like that? Did you end up having to do something in terms of buying more server capacity, or was it just like a temporary spike where a lot of people who'd never been there before checked it out and then the traffic kind of leveled out?
I did have to upgrade my server that day, and traffic basically doubled in the span of a couple days. And there's been some ebbs and flows, but it's been growing since then.
Is there anything that other than just the spike in traffic that you've noticed in terms of GBL? Do you keep any sort of statistics or analysis on like which mons are getting searched for and if they're different than the ones that you're used to having searched for being searched for, different ways people use the site? Do people use it in the same way they've always used it, or is it very different?
I do, yeah, actually every Monday, at least I try every Monday, I put out a like a trends report on my Patreon, which has stats on which Pokemon have been searched the most, changes from week to week, and then uh, data from like training battles people do.
And so, oh man, King, you said, and he said that it's part of your weekly Patreon report. Is there a certain level that someone donates at to be part of that?
Any level,
Any level?
it's available to anybody who contributes, and thank you so much to everybody who does. You're all amazing, and um, it's it's really hard to believe um, where things are at now and how amazing this community is. Like I'm so uh, glad to be part of it.
Agreed. Do you? Is it self-sustaining? I mean, it doesn't seem to me that you do this as a for-project enterprise, for-profit enterprise like most of us do not. But is it something that actively costs you money, or is it at least self-sustaining, something that you don't have to, uh, every time you need more servers storage, you're not just doing it out of the kindness of your heart?
Yeah, the thankfully because of how I built it, which was smart but also a little lazy. It's pretty cheap to run, so there's really no danger of like um, I don't know, the site's getting too much traffic. I'm gonna have to scale it back or something. It's pretty self-sustaining.
So the battle emulator that you wrote, is that a completely different kind of project? It would seem. I mean, obviously it's still web based. It's still based on Pokemon, but did that involve like exercising a different set of programming chops, if you will? I would assume uh, most of the PvPoke stuff is what, Python and databases and that sort of stuff, and that I would think the emulator would involve more real time kind of stuff.
Actually, there are no, well, I do have like a game master file um, that is like an adapted version of what the actual app uses, but with simplified stuff like it doesn't have avatar data or things like that. Um, but there isn't a like a back end database, which makes the site much cheaper to run. It's basically like a data file, a
Oh,
JSON file that
right.
loads, and then all the sims. This is um, my bit of cheating here. All the sims are run client side. Uh,
Okay.
it's it's super cheap to run. Like it's just math, um, and that also helps like keep it fast, and um, that does introduce some issues if you want to run like a sim of 1,000 Pokemon versus 1,000 Pokemon. That's something an awesome server could help with. Uh, that PvPoke wouldn't be set up to do right now, but
You talk about having the JSON files, and I think at some point in time, maybe I've even like downloaded those to try and look at them a little bit, but I wouldn't know what I was looking at. If somebody wanted to do something with the files that you've got there in terms of like, manipulating them in another way, is that something? It's all open source, and you have no problem with anybody doing that, right? Have you seen any interesting projects that people have done that have kind of spawned off of what you've done?
yeah, absolutely. For example, the Go Stadium has like a move bot, um, and like a ranking spot that uses the data from those JSON files. Um, there are, I can't think of any other ones off the top of my head, but definitely people have contacted me and asked to use that data, and totally out there for anybody to use.
And how much work does it take for you to actually maintain those when they do an update or something? Is it automated when you see what they've done in the game master? It somehow updates in your file, or is it something you have to do manually?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I have some scripts in place to automate moving some stuff forward. Like if there's a whole new generation of Pokemon, I got something that can bring them over. Um, but usually, in if it's a balance update or something, a couple moves have changed. A couple Pokemon have moves added to their move pool. Um, I I just go in manually and change stuff, and yeah, quick and dirty, get it done.
In terms of the different changes that they've made in the game mechanics, have those proven challenging for you to implement in the game, or were those something that you were fairly prepared to do and didn't take you a lot of time? Say like the buffing and debuffing moves. I mean, your simulator initially wouldn't have had any reason to touch that. Was that a significant undertaking for you?
That was pretty easy. I had kind of expected that would happen at some point and kind of planned around that. Um, Potential future mechanics like HP restoring moves would also be pretty easy to do. One thing that really threw me for a loop was the whole um, like when fast moves register and under tapping and over tapping and that
Oh,
whole thing. God, that was a nightmare. I was in the middle of making the training simulator when um, Flark Fiasco approached me with, and Garrett approached me with, hey, the mechanics of this game are actually really weird. Here's what's going on. And I was like, oh God, I have to change everything. Um, so that was a lot of work, um, but I worth it in the end.
I do think I remember that. I think I remember you having an interview after that talking about it. What when they release these little minor changes, or whether you consider them minor or not, and they introduce, take away different bugs, which affect the way that the game is played, how well do you think at this point you understand the way that the system works on like a granular level? Like if you see, oh, the over tapping bug is back. I know I saw Wild Susan Boyle talking about it. Seemed like it was like an input buffer issue or something like that. Like, do you look at these things and you think, oh, I understand what this is? I understand how I could tweak my algo if I need to, or do you just kind of leave it alone for a while? What's your approach?
That's a great question. That's really relevant right now, especially with over tapping coming back. Because now it's like, well, it's clearly a bug. how do I implement this? Do I not? Um, how long is this going to take to get fixed? Kind of thing. Um, I have a great group of people I work with on like a PvPoke mechanics uh, discussion, and that includes. I'm going to bring up a list here because I'm bound to. I don't want to leave somebody out. Um, but we've got Fleck Fiasco, Garrett K, um, uh, Alpha Phoebe. Let's see here. Um, from Mr. Valor. Uh, if Discord would load here. Unknown Veer. Kari Yoshiaki. I'm sure I butchered that name. Kev Killerkey. Um, Lots of great people who help me research mechanics and dive into this crazy stuff when stuff gets broken. So when the update came out a couple of days ago, we dove in, did a bunch of testing. It does seem like it's probably an input thing and not like a core mechanic thing. So hopefully that is easier to fix than something really deep in the woodwork.
Right. So you just, when you see something like this, you pretty much just let it be because you assume it's not intended to be this way. Hopefully it won't last very long, and it would probably be very difficult to really account for because it's not reliable, right?
Yeah, since it's an input thing, like sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. And rather than a mechanics thing, I'm fine with leaving it be for now. Um, there one of my favorite moments from the weekend of the LA Mega Tournament. Um, we were all at the PvP house, and there was something really funky in a matchup going on. I think there had just been a recent update, and it had appeared on someone's phone that undertapping was back, and like there was an audible gasp from us watching this game unfold, and then we realized it was just crazy lag and everything was normal. But yeah, stuff is crazy.
That was at the PvP house where you were for the, was it Seattle Battle Tower? Or was that was the one that actually occurred, right? Or which one was? Or it was just a different
Oh,
PvP
this was that it was before Battle Towers.
Okay.
It was the LA Mega Tournament, and yeah, PvP house hype. Thanks so much, Sir Maximus, for being such an excellent host.
Nice.
Um,
So this wasn't where you had your lickitung that you or licky, sorry, licky. I'm sorry.
yeah,
I could
that
see
was
the just disdain that I'd mistaken that you would use a licky tongue. No.
yeah, that was at the Portland Battle Tower, and the story. There's a story behind that. Um, I was taking an Uber to the tournament venue, and we got stuck on the other side of a drawbridge. So we were sitting there for a good 15, 20 minutes. And the team I was coming in with was pretty vanilla. I was like, okay, I got to change this up. So I was browsing potential spice picks, and the one I landed on was Licky Licky. So I just grabbed one from my box, powered it up, um, and finalized my team like maybe 5 minutes before the tournament started.
And didn't that led to round one sticks? Was it sticks 10 upset? Is that right? I'm trying to remember the result there.
Yeah, yeah, it was a round one win, and like FP Sticks is such a good battler. He should never
He should never be
never
forced to
let
face
that.
a licky
Yeah,
licky.
like no, he shouldn't hold him over himself. It's like I have no idea how I won, but um, it's just something that happened, and you know, I ended up going 5-3, so I was pretty happy with how that turned out overall.
How do you feel like working on PvPoke and just all the different things that you do affects your actual ability to play the game? Like I get the sense that you're good at it, but you're not considering yourself elite. And what do you think the difference is between you and the folks that are just the elite players, like Wild Susan Boyle and those folks? If you have such an innate understanding of the game and you spend so much time on the numbers, what do you think the difference is?
Definitely experience. If you look at my total battle count, it's significantly lower than a lot of the other people you might see. The numbers aren't everything. The sims aren't everything. Uh, you also need to play a bunch. Uh, so hats off to the people who do. And I'm trying to get better. I I'm on a hot streak right now, which I'm setting myself up to really crash and burn here. But feeling pretty good, and watching streams like this has been really helpful, and hopefully helpful for a lot of other people too.
um, so how has where you've lived generally affected the way that you play the game prior to PvPoke and all that, and just outside of just the stops that you've got? What was the Minnesota community like for you just before all of this PvP madness?
It was a pretty heavy raiding community. We'd have, like, during the raid days, we'd have big raid trades going. Community days were always a big deal. Um, and PvP's been interesting. We have some super competitive people here, some of the best in the world. Um, and we also have a bunch of different communities of battlers. And hopefully we can bring them all together at some point for some big tournaments, but we'll see.
So were you a fairly serious Pokemon Go player before PvP, or and like day one, or?
Close to day one. I started week 2, I think. Actually, I didn't have a smartphone until Pokemon Go came
Oh
out, and
wow.
that was almost the reason I got a smartphone. Let's be honest, it really was the reason I got a smartphone. Um, and yeah, I was pretty hardcore player. I'm not I'm not like super grindy anymore, but um, yeah, I was up there.
How do you feel about the game itself outside of PvP these days? I mean, is it, you say you're not as grindy? Is it, aside from the fact that we're all kind of locked up right now, does that part of it just appeal to you less now, or is it just you don't have time for it?
I think that's a good question. Um, the biggest grind right now is dust for sure. I'm always game for like triple dust events.
Oh yeah.
I hit those pretty hard. Um, I would say I think the slow rollout of Pokemon and raid bosses has been a little bit of a drag, maybe. Um, I'd like to see, you know, shadows everywhere on the radar and go chasing wild stuff, and that was always a fun time. Um, but yeah, I mean, this is such a tough time right now that I think they've made some really good pivots and made the game a lot more solo friendly. Um, so that's good. Hopefully, we get a really good raid boss soon enough. Um, I'm pretty bummed out that Virizion didn't get a Sacred Sword,
Yeah.
which is too bad.
How do you feel about just the different iterations of the game, even before we hit this pandemic mode that we're in? Kind of the shift of the spawns, if you will, from more varied, focusing on kind of trash spawns with the biomes having a pretty heavy influence on things, to kind of a reality where almost everything is driven by event spawns. Do you I mean, it's basically the event spawns are the new trash spawns, and there's almost nothing else at any given time except whatever's in a nest. So, what does that do to you in terms of the way that you are or aren't motivated to play the game?
Yeah, that's tricky. I think I enjoyed the spawns more when they were um, a little more random, a little more varied, rather than having a week of this or that Pokemon or this or that type. Because you could walk anywhere and never really know what you might stumble upon, and I think that was kind of the secret
Right,
magic of the game for a little while.
right.
Um, finding that wild Dragonite and then having it run away from you. But um, I definitely feel the event fatigue for sure. Um, and that's also a problem a little bit for PvP too, because there might be some really specific Pokemon you need for a Sylph Cup, and it's not going to spawn in forever because it's going to need a dedicated event for it.
One of the things that's kind of interesting, and I guess you probably don't have direct insight into this, but maybe in a roundabout way you do. So you tend to know the Sylph metas ahead of time a little bit because they'll give you the information so you're able to get prepared, right?
Yeah, yeah, I work closely with Sylph, and I'm really thankful for that relationship. And every all the efforts they've made over season 2 have been uh, really, really appreciated for sure.
It because it always seems to me that even though it is the case that some of the Pokemon that are relevant might be difficult to come by, that more often than not, it seems like Niantic finds a way to make them somehow available at the right time, and I've never really known which direction that was coming from. And maybe you don't see the same thing, but I always just think that we're gonna have a cup where Scizzor's relevant or something, and then suddenly there'll be like Sizors will be available as research tasks or something like that. Like there always seems to be a way that these things are available if you really look for it. But I just didn't know if you thought that there was actually any sort of tip of the hat whatsoever coming from Niantic on that. Do you think that they actually kind of acknowledge certain things being needed and maybe put them out there in a certain event?
That's interesting. I remember for the Toxic Cup, for example, um, there was an event mid-month that was like a bug steal event for Genesect, and that was like perfect for the Toxic Cup.
Right.
Although the spawns didn't end up being too relevant, um, but I think um, like it they maybe they throw some bones every once in a while. Like it happens reverse way too, like with the I almost said Rainbow Cup, the Forest Cup. Um, some of the Pokemon that are relevant there, like Ovantula, Ampharos, both came off of some uh, big events that featured them.
Right. Um, if somebody were new to your site, or if somebody's been using your site for a while, but maybe they haven't quite understood what they were looking at, how would you do the explain like I'm five for PvPoke on how somebody ought to use it, especially if they're looking at like the rankings? How would you tell somebody to look at the rankings, which obviously seem to kind of change over the month? You'll usually seem to make some tweaks to it. Like, how should somebody look at that just as a first glance?
That's a good question. And actually, I owe somebody some tutorial videos. They know who they are.
Uh-oh.
And if you're watching, I'm sorry. And it's gonna happen, I promise. Um, I would say the rankings especially. Um, the rankings are in the broad strokes, a general idea of what's good in PvP. Um, so look at it for Pokemon ideas, for moveset ideas, for team ideas. Um, but don't think too much on like the difference between the number 3 Pokemon and the number 5 Pokemon. Like it's it's pretty general. Um, and you can see individual matchups. You can see which Pokemon beat which Pokemon in general. Um, and a big that is a big um, knowledge gap to cross for newer players. There's lots of knowledge gaps to cross, like the typings and what move sets all Pokemon have and things like that. And that's something you can study and um, improve on as you battle.
Do you have or what was the process for you when they came out with the Elite Charge TMs and they announced that most but not all of the moves were going to be available with those? In terms of a ranking or just an analysis standpoint, you had a completely different problem, or not completely different, but a different problem to solve in terms of which move sets are actually possible, which move sets are actually likely, ones that are going to be prevalent versus just kind of could possibly happen. How have you approached that in terms of throwing move sets into the simulator, if you will?
Actually, that solved kind of a reverse problem of before. Um, my moveset process, I need to tweak it, but there's a process where it goes through and counts like how often would a Pokemon use each move across the meta, and then constructs movesets based on those. And a lot of times you get impossible stuff like Wing Attack, Blast Word, and Charizard. And I have like some manual overrides that I go in and say, okay, Charizard can't have these two moves, give it these moves instead. But now it's like, okay, sure, have them, go for it. So that fixes that problem. Thankfully, all the Elite TM move pools were added in the Game Master, which I knew they would be, but I'm glad that happened because then I could just import them into my Game Master, and um, it just works.
Is there anything that's left in the non elite TMable move pool that you think is a relevance move at the moment for anything?
Um, Probably, let's think. None of them are terribly relevant. I would say Discharge on Zapdos, maybe. Um, Although, honestly, I think Zapdos was going to want Thunder or Thunderbolt anyway. Mudshot on Golem and Graveler is also pretty nice. But for the most part, they're not terribly relevant moves.
Have you personally used your elite TMs, any or both?
I have not. I am likely to hoard them and uh, never touch them. I will be making a Thunder Shock Zapdos once I get that.
Shadow or
That's for
regular?
sure. I didn't catch Shadow Zapdos.
Oh.
I know. It hurts. It was at a time when like the quest required you to purify 15 Pokemon,
Right.
and like Shadow Pokemon didn't have a boost then, so it was like it didn't seem worth it. But now obviously, like, gosh dang it.
So not a big fan of the shadow feature outside of their newfound utility.
No, I'm not a big fan of the shadows. I think they turned out okay. Um, but and in the data mined code there was like a boost that purified Pokemon got against shadow Pokemon, which they still might get. So that could be coming someday. But the whole system just felt really not the right approach to adding variety, I think, to PvP. Um, and it was kind of a nightmare to implement because basically the number of Pokemon that I had to sim doubled right then and there. Uh, so overall, a very big headache.
And when you do those sims, how do you account for the shadow and non-shadow varieties? Do they basically behave as completely different entries and each carries the weight of a full Pokemon, or do they carry like half weight, or how does that work?
I do have them listed as separate Pokemon. In my weightings, I assign weightings to meta matchups so that like Azumarill counts 60 times more than other Great League Pokemon or something like that. So there being a, Weeping Bell and a Shadow Weeping Bell doesn't really count for much.
So is that the kind of stuff that you do the most tweaking to when we might see the ratings change throughout the month? Is just the weight you put on particular mons based on usage data, or are there other more manual changes you make that might not be as obvious?
Yeah, it's the weightings, which I look up data on either SylphGG or um, data that YTX Pikachu puts together on Go Stadium. And sometimes I'll dig into my own like training battle usage data too, if there's some gaps. So it's either that or like changing move sets. And the the ranks are like um, I'll be honest, it's like 50% math and 50% feeling. Like tweaking the rates for the weights for Master League, for example, like Dialga's got to be top 5 or something, or like at least somewhere up there. And if it's not, then you're like, okay, this is a little bit wrong. Let's fudge some numbers here. I
So
mean,
you've got some
it's
math and you just kind of like throw some salt in till it seems right.
yeah. So like it's a lot of tweaking and a lot of work, and that's why like it's tough to keep the season uh, 2 and season 1 formats up for Silpharina, because there's so much that goes into them that when like a new Pokemon gets released or new move sets come out, it would just take so long to update all that stuff that I unfortunately can't keep them up anymore for
Yeah.
the long term.
The Arkansas PvP servers, Alyssa Rose, she's on my Sunday podcast or Sunday streams, and she was telling me that you had specifically put some of those back up for Battle of the Servers so that they could have those for reference. So, what you're saying is basically for each individual meta, the math may be set, but especially with moveset changes and the fact that we're not going to have nearly as many people poking at each of these metas anymore, it makes it a lot more difficult for you to do the subjective part, right?
Yeah, and also my ranking process has gotten a bit longer. With the introduction of shadows, there's about twice as many Pokemon, and then I've also added extra ranking categories as time goes on. So it takes a little longer to regenerate each time.
When when there's a moveset update, I have noticed that sometimes the information for one meta might be updated before the other. Is that just simply a matter of like that's the JSON file that you've updated first, and you go from one to the next, and certain ones don't end up getting updated probably?
I usually try to do them all at once. I think when I used to have the season one cups up, I would just kind of push them off to the side and be like, "Oh, okay, I'll do those later. Those are gonna take a little bit," and then just kind of had to drop them. But
Other past the was the battle simulator was the last like major feature implementation that you added, right? I mean, you have like four sections to the site, and you probably are afraid to add more than that because it would get messy pretty quickly.
um, the yeah, like keeping those up is like if I wanted to have training up for Twilight Cup, um, that would that all that stuff would change pretty frequently with Pokemon releases and move sets and stuff. Um, and then I think the last major release, semi-major release, was the updated Team Builder. Um, and I know I've got some updates I want to do for that. So stay tuned. Um, but finding the time to work on that stuff while also keeping up with the uh, day-to-day updates of the game is a pretty tough balancing act.
Um, are there features that you do have in mind that you see coming someday, but you just haven't had the time to implement, or do you pretty much like the idea of keeping it as uh, core focused as possible? And if somebody else wants to do something different, then let them do that.
Um, some I definitely want to do are like adding custom groups to the team builder. Um, One tool that's been floating around for a little while is like a mass breakpoint and bulk point finder, um, where it'll visually like overlay, here's your minimum attack, your maximum attack, and here's all the Pokemon you can hit breakpoints and bulk points
All right,
against.
I
And
want that.
yeah, yeah. So that's something I want to do someday. Um, let's see what else. I've got a list going. Um, yeah, I'm sure chat can can think of some crazy stuff.
What do you think's the most? Has there been like an outrageous feature that somebody's asked you to add that you're just like, how on earth? I can't possibly do that, but they were sincere in asking for it.
The most frequent one, and it's awesome, but I can never do it, is like actual PvP emulation, like Pokemon Showdown. It would be totally cool, but way outside where I want to go. The training simulator was. Um, I'm not gonna touch PvP emulation with a 10-foot pole, but the training simulator was my 5-foot pole, 15-foot pole. If you want to touch it with a longer pole, yeah, that's how that works.
All right, yeah, I have people asking, and it's definitely been something that I have longed for. What would be the likelihood that we'll see something in the not too distant future that involves the ability to say log into an account or otherwise have data stored that we don't have to just have in either in a cookie that's on that computer uh, or just you have to input each
Oh yeah,
time as
yeah,
far
yeah.
as IVs or like a battle box kind of thing, which I think that Poke Battler has something of that nature, right? For donators probably. So, is that anything that you have thought about tackling?
Oh yeah, that's another big one. And that's a really tough one, because of the way that PvPoke has worked. Is it's lightweight, it's small, no database interactions, keeps things very fast and cheap. Um, and then once you start getting into like accounts and storing stuff in a database and things, the complexity of that really balloons.
Right.
Um, Also, from my previous Skyrims, I have experience with managing um, uh, like accounts and databases and stuff like that. And I don't know if it's something I'm willing to do at a big scale again.
So you think that more likely than not we won't be seeing that anytime soon? What when it comes to the way that the uh, when you're trying to maximize IVs on the site, does that have a preset pool? Do you have already figured out like what the max stat product, max defense, max attack versions are, or is there some code that's executing on the client side that is determining that on the fly?
Yep, that's all calculated client side. It's easy to do that for one Pokemon, but you might notice if you're running if you select like max IVs for a custom group and then run the sim, it might take a minute. Um, and that's why um, like the rankings, for example, don't have a default version and a max IV version.
Um, I know that when they put in the code the information for the best buddies, that you uh, fairly quickly jumped on that and put the code in for up to level 45 because that's what it was showing, and then you implemented the radio button for level 41. But if you manually put in 45, it still works. What about the potential now that we're going to level 50? Is that something as simple as you just changing a value on the backside for what it will accept, or is there more math or confusion involved in
Maybe more confusion.
that?
Um, there are no numbers yet for what the CP multipliers would be for levels above 45. So we'd have to wait and see what those would be.
Okay. What do you think as a player of the game? What is your thought process on what the best way to see a ramped up level system be? Like, do you think that it would be healthy for the game if we suddenly had level 50s, level 50 accounts, level 50 ish, 51 Pokemon if they're best buddies? Or do you think that it should be something more gradual?
Good question. Um, More progression is good depending on the kind of progression that it is. Um, if levels, 40 to 41 to 50 we're an XP base, but we're like hitting certain milestones that could be cool. Um, and like with leveling, God, hopefully the Stardust doesn't scale the same way it
Oh
scales
man,
for like level 35 to 40.
right.
Um, Hopefully, yeah, I don't know. Maybe you power Pokemon up to level 40, but you can adjust the best buddy boost to give it anywhere from 1 to 10 levels, or who knows. Um, uh, from a game perspective, from a PvP perspective, um, as long as getting to those higher levels is easy, which probably wouldn't be the case. But if it were, it just opens up the playing field for so much more Pokemon, that max out at, 1,000 CP and don't quite get there. But oh God, Chansey is going to be a nightmare. That's something you don't want to think about. Oh
Definitely
no.
not. From a fan of the game, a player standpoint, how do you feel about the buddy feature in general? Do you actually use it? Do you like the idea of it, but you don't actually find yourself doing it, or do you just are you all in on it? How do you feel about it?
Um, so I just made Great Buddy
Oh,
with my Dialga like last week, and I had been working on it for months. Um, so I slack there a lot. um, Yeah, I should get on that more. Um, when it first came out, I felt really overwhelmed by like having 10 buddies and like trying to switch through them every day. And that I probably doomed myself from trying to do that, rather than just having one buddy and making gradual progress. You'll get there.
Right.
Um, so no, I haven't used it too much.
And how do you feel about that from a uh, competition standpoint? I think it. I've definitely heard people say that some of them think it's just part of playing the game, and other people really feel like it hinders interest in playing because you have to have a best buddy Dialga or something in order to be like super competitive in Master League or something like that because of the uh,
Oh God,
breakpoints
yeah.
and the CMP issues. And so, do you think it's a good game design decision or not?
Um, hmm, I think, gosh, it definitely was a big conversation in like the um, Sylph circles initially of like Metacham and Sableye were already frequently banned in Sylph Cups. But now if there's like a 30-day um, grind period of getting best buddy, like how how could you balance for that? Ultimately, since the that was when we thought the best buddy boost would be 5 levels, and it's just 1 level, so didn't turn out to be that big of a deal. But for Master League, that's tough. That's more of a problem with how breakpoints work than the buddy system, though.
Do you see that as being anything that ever gets changed, or do you think that that's pretty much hard coded into the way that this whole game works? Is that the breakpoints are going to work that way? Is it a matter of like just it's integer math or like rounding something along those lines that it would be a lot more intensive for them to do it otherwise?
My gut says it would be really intensive for them to change that, um, because you're moving from storing integers to storing floating points
Mm-hmm.
for um, you know millions and millions of Pokemon entries. Um, although, yeah, that's a tough question. I could see them. There are some ways working around it in the battle system, like if they multiplied effective HP by 10 and damage by 10, then you notice that a lot less. Um, but yeah, it's a potentially tough issue, but something they could fix with some math on the um, battle side.
All right. So how are you feeling so far about the Forest Cup meta from both the standpoint, or first from the standpoint of how do you feel about having it nailed down? Do you feel like it's fairly figured out, aside from the fact that we know they always uh, morph? Or do you feel like there's still some refining to be done in how you've ranked them or how their usage numbers are stacking up?
I think there's still lots of room for the Forest Cup to develop. Like on the surface, it's pretty RPS. You've got, Mantine, who's double weak to electric, which get beaten up by Ferrothorn, and Ferrothorn is double weak to fire. And so there's those big meta players there. But I think there's a lot of anti-meta opportunities that um, maybe um, could use a bit more of a spotlight, like stuff like I think Stunfisk will be big the second half of the meta. Um, Stuff like Wormadam Trash, um, and there's kind of a micro meta between Azumarill and Kingdra that also is playing out. Um, so that could be cool. I think it's unfortunate that um, I don't know if it'll get the chance to play out all that much because uh, depending on when stuff happens, we could be getting a new meta in um, a week or more, and then the hype will shift to that. Um, but we'll see.
What do you think, either from a workflow standpoint, which might be a different answer, or from just a health of the community standpoint, in terms of a month being the length of a Sylph meta? Do you think that that's too long? That's not long enough? Do you think that it might help uh, the health of the game if it were a different period of time, or do you think that we're about at the right spot? Because I mean, I know what you're saying in terms of like a new meta gets released and then it's almost like the other meta doesn't exist. Like the interest in it probably halves or less, and suddenly everybody's just looking for these new Pokemon and looking at those rankings.
I've thought a lot about this as for like potential changes to season three. Um, there's upsides and downsides to having a monthly meta. One is um, there's a pretty steep Stardust cost for powering up new things every month. Season players have less powering up to do because over time they build up these big collections of Pokemon, and odds are, stuff that's meta in one format is going to be meta in a different format where it's allowed. Um, but also, um, like 1 month is a pretty short time um, for things to play out. Um, but also, we're in a unique time where people are having, 7 round remote
Right.
tournaments multiple times a week, and a couple weeks in, metas get pretty played out. Um, so kind of a unique situation there. Um, I've thought a lot about that and about like, hey, what if metas were in two phases where like you had this, and this type, and then the second phase you add this type, and it's kind of mostly the same but changes a little bit. I don't know. That's a that'll be a big conversation that I probably won't be having, but I'm sure people will be having um, going into season three.
What's been your personal experience in terms of doing tournaments in, as you say, this unique time that we're in? Have you been doing a ton of remote tournaments? Do you not typically have the time or the patience to do the 7 rounds lives or whatever? I know that I can find those very tiresome at times, but they're fun, but like the waiting for the disputes in that round 6 or whatever can be pretty interminable, especially if you're no longer in the mix for it.
Right. My proudest achievement is sweeping an Autorec tournament 7-0. So
Nice.
um, happy birthday, Mel. I love live remote tournaments more than regular remote tournaments.
Right.
Having having to coordinate matches is kind of stressful for me. So just being able to block out,
Agreed.
4 or 5 hours where, all right, I'm gonna just play this tournament. It's gonna be over and done with, and um, that's nice.
Do you
I
ever
haven't been playing too many tournaments, but it's been fun.
do you ever find yourself asking the deep philosophical question, if you are referring to PvPoke in the middle of a tournament, are you technically cheating because you made it yourself and it's your tool, and it's your brainchild, and it's really just a bunch of data files that you've presented yourself.
No, 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 I wouldn't do that. It is cheating. It's against the rules. Don't do it.
Oh, what what have been your favorite spicy mons to potentially make a dent in forest, especially now that the move set changes
Ooh.
have gone through?
Um, Heatmore looks pretty spicy. I gotta say. I gotta say. Because there's a, besides Sunny Cast Form, there's a pretty significant lack of fire fast move damage. And when you're packing Thunder Punch and can like blow Mantine out of the sky, that's pretty sweet. That's pretty sweet. It seems tough to make work, but I bet someone can do it. Some um, skilled battler out there can do it. Actually, Caleb was just running it on the Go Stadium stream. I didn't get to stick around for that, but
Speaking of Caleb, with YouTubers releasing videos that seem to shape the GBL meta, do you foresee there being any sort of like small tweak or like smaller section that you might need to make that would be kind of a I don't even know what you would call it, almost like the hot 3, the hot 5, in terms of like this is what is like trending today or the last 2 days. I guess you do the weekly ones and you say you have the information about like the teams that fare the best against that, but it really feels like, as opposed to the sylph metas, which kind of shift from like week to week, like these things, they shift from one day to the next, and usually like in like 1 or 2 day cycles, and it seems really difficult to keep up with. Is that something you could ever imagine being able to keep up with, or do you think that's just kind of part of the fun of playing the game and keeping up with that?
yeah, for sure. I would need to find a way to automate it, but that would definitely be fun to do. I have the data to make it happen. Just got to figure out how to plug that in.
All right. What would be your take on what you want to see the PvP community turn into? Are you someone who's particularly concerned about whether it's quote an esport, whether or not it reaches a certain level? Is it more about your interaction with the community and the people that you already know? Like, just what kind of goals do you have for either yourself or the community moving forward?
It would definitely be cool to see it be an esport. There's a ton of super competitive players and awesome people, and I mostly enjoy just um, being part of the community and talking to everybody. And one of the most rewarding um, moments was during regionals, just seeing everybody's. Um, I just won my regionals, tweet, and seeing how people have, or like hitting rank 10 and or rank 9 or things like that. Um, it's really cool to see people progress and win and succeed, and that's yeah, that's awesome.
I really hate to ask any questions that are kind of a turf war slash fanboy kind of thing. But what is your personal style in terms of preferring to do GBL, Sylph, or both? Like, which style is more your style of battling? The seeing six or the blind threes?
Seeing 6 for sure. Yeah. Um, I like there are times for blind 3, and it's fun. I do all my sets most days, and I there was a slump in season 2 where I didn't play a whole ton, kind of through Ultra League and Master League, and I'll admit I was feeling a little discouraged at some points. But something clicked like the last couple weeks of season one, and um, started trying out some spicy stuff, and that was fun. And um, yeah, but definitely show six for sure.
Do you ever find something that you think is like a spicy sleeper, and then you debate how long you should wait until you potentially update PvPoke to reflect its true power?
There are people teasing me about Licky Licky's ranks in the Rose Cup. The I don't adjust rankings based on what I use. Um, like I try to look at big picture meta stuff. For example, Polyrath probably is lower than it should be in the Ultra League rankings, and I looked at that for a while and uh, tried to figure out, where it realistically could or should place. I don't I don't keep secrets too much. There was a couple weeks ago I went up like 100 points with a Scum Tank team, and like I can't keep that to myself. So, it's like, guys, here's Scum Tank. This is awesome. Um, yeah, I can't keep that secret for my own good.
What does the Kakuna's legacy stockpile look like? Are you somebody who hoarded stuff, was able to acquire stuff, or do you feel like you get held back by your lack of holding on to those things?
Let's look. Well, thankfully they added a lot of legacies back. Um, I really sorely missed Shadow Ball Haunter for the longest time. Right before they just added a bunch of legacy moves back, I stumbled on a coworker of mine who had played Pokemon Go in 2016. So I got a lot of really good stuff from him. Um, so I got a pretty decent collection of, well, I suppose, former legacy moves. Um, yeah.
What do you think about the potential or the impact of Niantic if they were ever to decide to release any sort of IV manipulation items into the game, which I thought at one point was kind of seen in the code maybe several months ago, that people thought that there were IV manipulation items. They just didn't know the details. Do you think that that is something that would be good for the game? Do you think? I mean, I think the tack that most people see is that they say, "Well, we'd like to see it, but it would make them less money, so we'll probably never see it." Do you think that there's another obvious perspective to that?
As a player, I would love it for sure.
Yeah.
Being able to, increase or even decrease an IV, change that rank 1000 Skarmory into a rank 1 Skarmory. Um, but um, uh, I guess the skeptic in me could see it happening if they think they could make money from it. Like if, bottle caps were as hot a commodity as elite TMs, um, and, available at a similar rate, maybe.
I I think that the most recent game data suggested that perhaps we were going to maybe see the ability to use Ditto in PvP. How do you feel about Ditto being in PvP, and would you be able to sim that in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, for sure. It would just be the other Pokemon with a fixed HP stat. Um, so that would be funny. I was thinking about actually Zoroark before the Discovering Illusions, community quest was revealed. Oh, it's just Abra. I thought it might be Zoroark. Guess not. Fooled me. Um, that would be really funny though. You It would just be a game of mirror matches.
Right.
Um, then get your 15 attack dittos ready.
Yeah. 15 attack dittos for sure. Um, so you said that you made a nearly complete uh, Pokemon simulation at some point, a main series one. Does that, were you a fan of main series games going back?
Yeah, yeah. I started playing Yellow. I got it for Christmas one year. I think I was 6 or 7. Um, and was a um, definitely a huge main series player since then. I did miss Generation 4, but then came back for Gen 5 onward.
And what was your first starter?
My first starter was Squirtle, but since then I've come to love Bulbasaur. I'm definitely a Bulbasaur person now.
Is now, and that's, is Bulbasaur one of your favorites overall, or is Bulbasaur just your favorite starter?
My favorite starter for Kanto.
Okay.
Favorite Pokemon overall is Blaziken.
And
I have not gotten Stone Edge yet. I'm
no.
thinking about it.
Is Blaziken one of your favorites to use as well, or is it more just a favorite from nostalgic purposes?
Yeah, mostly for nostalgic purposes. But it it pops up in Sylph Cups as absurdly um, uh, more than you would think it would given its stats. But I won't complain.
This isn't even really related to simulation, but I really, speaking of Blaziken and also Swampert, I would really love to see Niantic go back to that model that they used for their community days, where they not only had the exclusive move, but they added the secondary move at the same time, the Blaze Kick or
Oh
the Muddy
yeah,
Water,
yeah.
because I feel
Um,
like we've gotten some additional moves on some of the starters. We've gotten like Skull Bash on Blastoise and things like that. But I mean, just the ability to make some of these starters even more interesting and versatile without just locking it into a community day move seems like a really, I don't know, it seems like a fun mechanic to me. But and that has been, I don't know. We've seen some people have success with Muddy Water, and we've, and Blaze Kick. Blaze Kick is practically
yeah, Blaze Kick's
indispensable
good.
at this
Yeah,
point. It's
absolutely.
like, I mean, I think that Blaze Kick and Stone Edge is the way most people would go. But I, even though I know some people would stick with Blast Burn.
Yeah, that would be really cool. Like Torterra, for example, is such a shame if it got like I don't know, wood hammer or something. It's too bad it's stuck with like bite and razor leaf.
Right.
Oh well, grass ground is also pretty rough typing, but that's tough to fix.
When you said you didn't think that Shadow Pokemon were the way to go in terms of adding diversity to the game,
Mm.
what were you thinking would be the better way to go? Do you think it's as simple as just opening up the move pool and just making sure that the TM system is supportive of that, or was there something else that you thought would really add diversity to the game in a more constructive way?
That's a really good question. Um, hmm, hmm. They already did a CP rework before PvP where they somewhat normalized HP and defense values. Um, I wouldn't ever suggest another change to the CP formula for all of our sakes. But um, actually, really, a really easy fix would just be to fix some of those awful fast moves like low kick um, or astonish, stuff like that. Would there are so many Pokemon stuck with crappy move sets that you could definitely increase diversity that way. Although you got to be careful. You don't want to like make Chansey super OP.
Right. um, do you think that if they were to do something where suddenly the move pools of each of the mons was opened up significantly, even if it was something like each one had at least 3 fast moves and at least 5 charge moves or something like that, do you think that that would make your task very difficult in terms of the simulation part because of the number of iterations that you'd have to consider?
Not particularly. Like, you would, I just have to try and find like which fast move is better, and okay, just use that one for whatever situation. Um, and that's a long-standing issue with the simulator in general, with multiple charge moves. Use the higher one with um, damage per energy, while using the less efficient move wins this matchup and stuff like that. So yeah, that would introduce some problems. I actually really don't dislike the idea of multiple fast moves. I think that breaks a lot of the tough team building decisions you'd have to make. Um, I do like the idea of, I really hope they do this at some point, of like a third status move.
Mm-hmm.
And where, it costs energy, but, you can't bait with it. It would be stuff like Swords Dance or Wish or stuff like that. I think that would really, that would be tough to sim for sure. But I think that would really open up a lot of interesting dynamics.
You mentioned the CP formula and the fact that it had been reworked once, and we all know it's the source of the strangeness with what we all call PvP IVs. What would you say in terms of the CP formula? Is there an objective reason for the CP formula to be the way it is in any way, shape, or form, or is it just completely arbitrary? Is there some merit to it?
The original CP formula was really based around gyms and raids, where having, a high attack stat meant you put out a lot of damage very quickly. And this might be a hot take, but I actually think the CP formula is just fine the way it is in regards to PvP. Because if attack, defense, and HP all have the same amount of value in the formula, for example, you would just see the same Pokemon relevant in each league. With the dynamic of the CP formula, it changes which Pokemon are relevant, and it makes bulky Pokemon, which are useless in raids and for attacking gyms, and gives them a purpose. So I think that's really cool. And it's also nice to have different IV types where you could say, all right, this 98% is really good for raids. But hey, if I get one that has like 0, 15, 15, it's really good for PvP. And I think that makes catching Pokemon more exciting because there's more types of IV combinations that are useful.
Yeah, I agree that it makes it more interesting, and unfortunately, it makes me keep way too many things. But how how do you think it impacts people who are very geared toward that raid oriented system? People trying to develop that interest in PvP with people. I think almost everybody who has done GBL on any level and then talked to somebody who's more of a PvP person goes through that kind of oh shit moment, and they say, so you're telling me all the perfect Pokemon I have suck for Great League? And you say, no, just most of them, and not always, and just like their eyes start to glaze over. What do you think would be a way to help bring some of those people into the PvP world in a less painful way, like explaining to them that kind of thing, and the thing like you said about how like the Pokemon you use are the ones that you probably thought were worthless. Like, how do you think you explain that dynamic to somebody who's just into the rating, or do you think that's just fruitless?
Um, I think those players probably see a lot of chatter about PvP IVs and um, they could someone should be there to tell them like they really don't matter that much. Like you can I used 100% Altaria for like all of Silpharina season one.
Right.
Um, and like just get the right Pokemon, get the right moves in battle. Don't worry about IVs at this point. You'll get to a point where they matter, but for now just, um, work on the basic stuff. Um, so I think, someone could tell them IVs aren't that important. And then um like sure you can't use Mewtwo in Great League, but um I like the idea of unique Pokemon being useful. Well, that's me.
I agree with that. What do you think about the dynamic of Pokemon that either initially or in perpetuity you can only get them at a certain level by trading them? What do you think, like the Creselias of the world and
That's such a
the
pain.
what do you think that there? Do you think that something like scaling ought to be in the game? Do you think certain Pokemon just shouldn't exist below a certain level, or do you think that the fact that somebody's able to get lucky enough or is dedicated enough to get that, do you think that that's actually something that should play into the game?
Well, I really don't think they can introduce scaling up. That would break a lot of the game's economy regarding, investing in Pokemon and powering up and stuff.
Right.
But there definitely should be a way to power down or scale down. Um, for all those people who have accidentally powered their rank one Pokemon over 1500. Uh, um, and that probably should come with limits because do you really want Giratina to define all three leagues? I don't think so. Uh, but yeah, so some method to scale or power down would be cool.
Do you have any personal bad beat stories in terms of Pokemon you accidentally powered up one level too far, or have you been fortunate thus far?
I've been really fortunate thus far. I did double move a Sunflora, which was not on purpose. And this was long before the bullet seed buff. So unfortunately, you'll never see it in battle. But I do have a really funny story from the PvP house in LA. Arrow was desperate for a really good Drapion for the tournament, and he had like no Stardust. He was gonna grind the community day as hard as he could to get the Stardust for his team. And I powered up a Drapion, double moved it, and was gonna trade it to him. And then, whoops, realized it had already been traded.
Oh.
So that is now my Drapion.
Oof. Oh man, that's funny. Um, let's see. What do you think about what do you think the most overrated PvP Pokemon is in terms of something that somebody's just going to use because they see that it's highly ranked, but if they don't necessarily know why it's ranked that high, or they just try and use it blindly, that it's not necessarily as good as the numbers might give it credit for?
I would say Spylus if I hadn't run it myself and done pretty well with it. Um, the Great League meta is pretty hostile for it, but I think with the right team comp and strategy, you can get it to work. Um, Psycho Boost Deoxys is if there was a question of like which Pokemon are you like an expert with? I would say Psychoboostiaxis. Um, I Some people think I'm crazy for not running Thunderbolt, but um, it's super technical, and if you don't play it right, things really go south. Uh, but it's fun.
What's kind of your personal approach to the way that you do PvP? Do you have a particular desire to worry about breakpoints? Do you tend to go for max stat product and just whatever the matchups are, they are? Do you like to run shinies? What do you like? I know you like to beam, but what's your personal play style?
Hmm. I would say, um, I yeah, I usually try to go for max stat product, although um, like I'm okay with my floor for like what I'm willing to power up is pretty forgiving. Um, so like I'll power up rank 300 or 500 stuff. Um,
Man.
I'd say my play style. Um, hmm, I'm still working on it. It's developing. I've gotten better at being aggressive and switching faster and things like that. Where before I was kind of more, strategy focused, which you might expect from a numbers guy, but um, lately trying to get into the groove, be more instinctual about stuff and all that.
Are there any other websites or tools that other people make that you find highly useful for PvP that's just a different take on it, a different angle, or do you not really rely on much else?
I do look at Poke Battler, and I think you guys should look at it too because he does awesome stuff that I can't do. Like I was explaining before, with Sims running client side, that running mass simulations is way out of my wheelhouse. But he's got crazy computer power over there, and um, all that stuff is definitely worth taking a look at for sure.
I think that yeah, that's a good point for me to, I guess, sort of re-ask a question I asked before because the person that is asking it is not necessarily thinking that I got it all the way, I guess. But is in terms of not necessarily logging into an account, but in terms of automating a way that you could perhaps have some IVs of your Pokemon retained, or maybe even like something similar to a how you do the import on the meta thing if you need to do exclusions or something like that. Is that something that would be more viable if somebody maybe had to go through a little bit of legwork, but they were still able to say like cut and paste from a CSV file into the uh, into the page as opposed to inputting everything manually each time?
Yeah, I think there's definitely doors for getting that working. Yeah, it's definitely something I've been thinking about for sure.
What do you think uh, are Pokemon that kind of fit the mold of Licky Licky in terms of not necessarily simulating as well as they might perform in reality?
Um, a lot of anti-meta stuff doesn't sim too well. A good example of that would probably be Alolan Raichu. It was down in the dregs uh, a little bit for most of season one. Um, but it's got a lot of anti-meta in one mousy package. Uh, um, so That's potentially one. I think Alolan Raichu is super popular. Like, uh, as far as like spice picks that are super low that could be usable. Hmm. I'd have to look into that one further.
Okay.
Yeah, I got beat by a Claydol the other day. That was really tough.
As a matter of personal pride, it was tough to be beat by a Claydol. Oh, do you tend to take your results seriously? Do you tend to do most of your sets, or do you just kind of take a light approach toward it?
I've been pretty good about doing all my sets so far this season. I missed some yesterday, but I don't take it too seriously. Play some here, some there.
What does the consistency score reflect mathematically?
It reflects baitiness, how much damage you lose between uh, failing your baits. So stuff like Power Up Punch and Bubble Beam have really low consistency.
So the more baity it is, the more inconsistent it is. Is that also going to be re- when you look at the like the overall rating? Is it more of an average of how it performs with and without baits, or does it take certain assumptions into account that one way or the other?
There's some interesting backstory there. All the Sims have baits by default. Running both would be a little too taxing for how I generate the rankings. A while back, I put out like a poll on whether people wanted me to have the Sims with baiting on or off by default. And very helpfully, the result of that poll was 50% yes, 50% no. Um, and then I decided, okay, I'll just keep it as is, and then the consistency score is kind of a band-aid for that. So the original problem was um, Suicune in Ferocious Cup, which had Bubble Beam and Hydro Pump, and like on paper, perfect bait Simwise that just killed everything. But the implementing the consistency score helped bring it down to a more reasonable level.
And so when you implemented the consistency score, and you can view that as a separate list, but it does impact the overall score, right?
Yep, yep. The overall score is a weighted average, where it weights the Pokemon's best roll pretty highly. Um, and the reason that is because um, there were some Pokemon that were like really good closers, like Cresselia and Groudon, that maybe weren't good shields up, but were still really good Pokemon. And if you just do a straight average of all the rolls, those Pokemon don't show up very well. Whereas if you weight like their best rolls, then they show up a little more reasonably.
All right. How when you're coming up with teams of three to use in GBL, and say you got a new Pokemon, how good are you at just kind of thinking off the top of your head, like, okay, I've never used this before. What two mons would I pair well with this? Or do you need to kind of go to the numbers to figure that out as well, or give it a lot of thought, or is it kind of second nature?
My general line of three strategy is you have your lead and then two things in the back that beat its counters. Um, so if I were running a grass lead, for example, I'd want two things that beat flyers or have neutral matchups against flyers. So like Meganium, Registeel, Azumarill is a pretty basic line of three that follows that principle. Um, and is it possible for the PvPoke AI to battle GBL for you? Robo coaching incoming. uh, no, that's not possible.
You would just have to do a bot and like a text to speech, and then have the person with the headphones on, and then we could have vigorous disagreements over whether the player was playing or whether the bot was playing.
Yeah, that's uh that's not territory I want to venture into.
Right.
Very frequently people will ask me like common things people are looking for and don't know exist yet are like the moves page, which lists move stats and move counts and things like that, or the matrix battle tool, which you can use to compare matchups between IV spreads.
And I think that this probably goes back to kind of what you were talking about with like the visual or simplified breakpoint finder. Um, One of the things that I will frequently use the matrix tool for, and partially at the direction of good old YTX Pikachu explaining how I should do this, um, is input the IVs I have for a bunch of mons against a certain meta and seeing where things fall. But inevitably, it's like it's still a static data point. So you're looking at your IVs against either maxed IVs or default IVs or whatever the set of IVs are, and then you see that, but it doesn't really give you that idea of like maybe a different colored box that would say, well, this one's actually kind of deceptive. If you just tweaked a little bit of something, you would actually lose this. Is there any? Is that kind of what you're thinking about with the breakpoint visualizer in a different angle, or is that not what you're thinking of, where you'd be able to see like which matchups really are the ones that you have to watch?
What I'd like to do with that is show spreads of stats, like the minimum attack you can have and the maximum attack you can have, and then a list of meta stuff that you can hit breakpoints against. So you can see, oh, okay, with a little bit of attack investment, I can hit breakpoints against this and this and this. Um, to visualize that a little clearer.
How good are you at knowing just off the top of your head, or just in the ballpark, what say a Pokemon stats are in terms of, some people are just like, oh, this mon will always beat such and such in the CMP, and so forth. Like, are you
um,
encyclopedic in that way because you've looked at the numbers so much, or do you still just kind of rely on the system to put those numbers together and not really commit it to memory?
I'm pretty good with the matchups, but like Toshi, for example, is just on another level. I don't even know. Like, um, yeah, he's crazy. He's got all the head knowledge.
Does he ever ask for features and you're just like, no, 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 I don't even understand?
No, he's good. He's good.
Is there a particular person who's pushed you to make more changes to the way it operates than anybody else?
That would definitely be go to the mechanics team I was talking about earlier. Um, they they give me a lot of work, but it's worth it.
Yeah, he says, I'll bet it's
And
guts.
Gots
Yeah.
too.
What teams stood out on your weekly list for GBL that either you like to run or that you think would have good success? Just
I uh, I haven't put together a list for this week,
okay.
season two. Um, I know I checked the numbers yesterday. For some reason, Well, I shouldn't say for some reason, because it's a really good Pokemon, but Tropius is doing pretty well in the training battles, at least.
And does it differentiate on movesets which Tropius is doing well? Because that's always like a kind of religious battle of Air Slash versus Razor
Right,
Leaf.
right. Both of them are doing pretty good. Air Slash is doing a little better than Razor Leaf, but that's mostly because it's more general that way, less specialized. But you know, Arrow, for example, runs a ton of Razor Leaf Tropius and
Yeah,
beats the Zoomer a lot harder. We'll
but
see.
but do you ever look at those at the different types and just think like, obviously this type hasn't gotten much attention, and fire really kind of does feel like it's got some pretty bad moves out there. Do you just assume that at some point it's going to get some TLC?
Yeah, Poison's another one that could use a lift.
Yeah.
I say as I run Poison.
Have you ever played any TCG?
A very little bit.
Where do you fall on the Azumarill moveset spectrum?
Oh, Ice Beam Play Rough for sure. Or Ice Beam Hydro Pump. God, ooh, what am I thinking? It is that time of night where you just start spouting nonsense.
I was
Ice
gonna
Beam
say,
Play Rough. What am I talking about?
oh man, that would upset Toshi, right?
Everyone should cover their ears for what you're about to hear. Can we bleep that out?
Oh, how do you feel about the luck-based moves? Do you think that it makes things more fun? Do you think I'm not a huge fan of them? I'll come out and say, but
Yeah, they're a nightmare to sim. I'll tell you that.
right.
Because
That whole worst case, best case scenario
yeah,
stuff that you've
yeah.
got, yeah.
With stuff like Night Slash and Ancient Power, I can almost pretend it doesn't exist because um, uh,
It's a small enough
like it's
buff.
just never going to happen. But stuff like Leaf Tornado, where it's a 50% chance to.
And our good friend Tushimonger always likes to know whether our guests have seen the movie Little Women, the 2019 version, not to be
Okay,
confused with any
yeah,
previous iterations.
I have not.
Okay,
So
man.
that is an experience I have yet to undergo.
Are you a movie guy? Do you like to sit down and watch movies, or is that not really a big pastime?
I do really enjoy movies. I don't typically sit down and watch them, which that's the problem. Uh,
What's your take on the algorithm? Is the
oh,
algorithm just
Dark Pulse. Oh
Oh
no.
man, is that people's confirmation bias, or do you think that there's weird mojo in the code?
Nah, like it's gotta be. There's it's I'm not a believer.
It's so hard for people who are math guys, and I mean I consider myself a math guy, but I think that like you would be leagues beyond me. But it's always so hard for people of our persuasion to believe anything of that nature. But what was the thing?
Oh, he switched on me, that bastard.
Oh, the EX raid invitation thing was the thing where like all the
Ooh, Jirachi, we got an answer for that.
nice, all the conspiracy theorists and folks definitely thought that they had proven their point when they
I gotta
figured out
preserve.
that there was the bug in that.
Uh, oh, wait, that's yeah, that's a. I'm not sure what happened there. Oh, they shielded.
I wish I had a good Jirachi. That's where we really need the IV manipulation items is on the one of a kind Pokemon.
Oh no. Oh no.
Oh,
Oh
oof,
no.
oof. Do you have? Oh, he didn't get it. What does Scizor have left in the tank?
It's not gonna make it, I
Oh
don't
no!
think.
Oh, get
Okay,
that
we're gonna
move
get
off.
one super effective X Scissor off. It's not gonna be enough because Kabutops is just gonna die.
Yeah.
It's gonna die.
Maybe
Oh.
maybe the one case where if you had the Fury Cutter Kabutops, it might have barely had enough. But Fury Cutter is a pretty weak move damage wise,
Yeah.
especially without stab.
Yeah. Oh.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, the number of things that would have to go right for an algorithm like that to work. And like, how would you, if people are supposedly being matched up in bad matchups,
Then
there's
somebody has
people
to
being
be on the other side. Right.
matched.
Oh, as somebody who did play the card game, I will say that when I would play that, I felt like something similar was going on, and I never attributed it to them trying to put you in bad matchups because that was the first thought that came to mind. But it always just felt like there was just something going on in the matchmaking algorithm that somehow different deck builds were like more or less likely to face one another. Like you would never ever see X deck unless you stopped playing this set of decks or something, where it was just like it would be like a light switch where you would go from playing just a standard deck and you're like, yeah, I'm going to play this other thing, and then you get hard countered like immediately and you're like, I've never even seen this deck in my life. But I don't know. It's like I don't know how that would look because I'm not a programmer, but it never really felt like it was a malice thing because they would have to have a reason to favor somebody. But it definitely always felt like there was something weird with the matchmaking algorithms.
Yeah. It's just you notice your losses more than your wins.
Right.
And
Yes. The confirmation bias.
all right, Scissor almost got it done. I think I could have won if I didn't they didn't I was careful not to throw X Scissor into Jirachi, and I probably could have swapped Kabutops into Jirachi instead of Swampert and kept Swampert for the back. But
Do you think there's something to learn in your losses even when you're in these auto wreck battles that you'll never face again?
oh sure, yeah, absolutely. Always practice good fundamentals and um, puts you in situations that you got to think outside the box a little bit.
I know I need to swap my Sableye into my best buddy slot because I sometimes like to use that. Do you ever engage in any of the open street maps or stop submission stuff? Are you into that part of the game, or were you before you had this to occupy yourself?
No, I submitted the one Pokestop on my house and on my building, and that was it.
Oh man, are you just fortunate enough to live somewhere where you can get away with that, or did you sneak that in?
No, it's a legitimate
Yeah.
stop.
He says defensively. I always feel like Skuntank is so good, but it's another case of confirmation bias where I always feel like I need the move that I don't have on that Skuntank, where it's always like oh, if only I had flamethrower, or if only I had crunch here, then it would be better.
So I could have thrown Deoxys against Registeel. But I'd rather throw Zoomerl here because I don't want it against Meganium in the back.
Are you good at tracking your opponent's energy on the mons that they have in the back or their health levels? Are you
Relatively, I've one time I forgot my opponent had 3 Pokemon. I had beaten 2 of them and thought, oh, this is done. But it wasn't.
Yeah, I've set my phone down before in the middle of like having thought I won a Go Stadium match and had to pick it up back quickly just to tap something down. It's slightly embarrassing. Oh, I'm great friends with Oscar Licious now. Thank you, Oscar. Sorry the chat is so small here on the screen. It was just kind of a last minute layout I threw together for us both to be able to have our phones on here. As I completely I'm almost to best buddies with my rainy cast form here.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
I know, it's pretty absurd, but what I did the same I'm not quite as behind as I was last meta. Last meta I had a best buddy I was working on for Tranquil, and I didn't even like finish it until Toxic was almost over. But
oh no, Tranquil is awesome though.
It really is. Like, I mean, it's a beast, especially because so few people see it or practice against it. Like, it's definitely pretty darn good. Oh man, I wish that they would implement something where you could more clearly read how close you were to best buddies, because like this doesn't tell me anything. Like, if I feed it a Poffin, am I going to be good? If I don't feed it a Poffin, am I going to make it today? I can't tell.
Right. Oh yeah, that's really close.
All right, we're wasting the freaking Poffin because I'm going to use the rainy cast form
Get
now.
it.
Although
I love rainy cast form. It's
rainy
fantastic.
It is great.
I've been using it a lot in the Ghost Stadium team tournament. It's been MVP for sure.
All right, and which are you on the? What's the team you're on? Are you on the?
I'm a proud member of the Helmet Heroes.
That's what I thought, and we got. I think we even had some questions coming in from Casey on those. How do you really feel about your team, the Helmet Heroes?
How do I really feel? I love them. How could I feel any differently? They're fantastic. I am so proud of my teammates. They have done amazing things.
Is this team partaking in both the Go Stadium and the Battle of the Servers, or just one or the other?
Just Go Stadium.
And where are you guys at right now? Did you already get through your second round?
We are under the 4th round. I think it is now. Yeah.
Oh man, I'm way behind. What was it?
Or was it? Yeah, we played.
I guess it would be third round. I was thinking we faced the Elite Four in our third round, so that didn't go so well for us.
That is rough. Oh no.
Yeah. Or no, I'm sorry. We faced the Elite Four in the second round, and we did beat them, but we just lost.
Congrats.
We lost to who did we lose to? I got swept by a team that on paper just looked like it was so beatable, but they wrecked us. And what was the team? It was absurd. It was a team where basically everything on their team was pointing toward them bringing Whiscash, and they never brought it once. And they just like outpicked me. They outpicked me every single
Bamboozle.
time. I was completely bamboozled. Both teams doubled down on us. We waited until the last match to do ours, and I mean, I was convinced that I had a good shot to at least take 2 out of 3, and just got, like you said, bamboozled. It was crazy. I got hit by Sunnycast. It was bizarre. The whole team was weak to Sunnycast except for my whole team was strong to Sunnycast except Tropius, but they managed to line it up, and make me look bad. But do you have any advice for me? I have to face Toe Technical in the first round of Battle of the Servers.
Oh my
And
god.
I'm just
Oh
like,
wow.
seriously? Good thing it's double elimination. I'm going from Valor Ash to Toe to. It's just. It's really
That
not
is
fair.
rough. Yeah, I can't say um have any specific advice other than good luck.
All right, my rainy cast form is now a best buddy. So
Nice.
forget about putting my Sableye in that slot. We're gonna run it. Can I run a double? What would I do if I ran a double water team with Sea King and Sunny and Rainy Cast? What could go with it?
Let's see. You want something to beat electric and grass? So probably Altaria, maybe.
In the lead, or
I would do. Is Kingdra safe or is Seeking a safe swap? I don't know. Seeking really wants to be in the lead, though. I feel.
yeah,
Um,
that's why I'm wondering if I can
Gosh,
even get away with running double water. It's probably just silly.
no, that's tricky. If you get a bad matchup in the lead, you'll just have to let Seeking go down.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. We can just let Sea King die a horrible grizzly death. All right. Anybody else going to take us up and make us run auto Rex in our GBL? Surely you want to torture us.
We've got King in the chat.
Oh,
Hype.
what's going on, King? Oh, we got the good lead here. We got the Sea King versus the Altaria. So we're
Yep.
starting out hype.
Got Skuntank versus Azumarill over here, sitting pretty good.
I feel like if they're not bailing, I invest at least the first shield into Sea King just to let them know Sea King means business.
Mm.
You can't let Sea King go down without a fight.
Oh, yeah. This is going to be a poor decision. Oh, okay. Guess my move didn't go off.
Oh man, a double debuffed Altaria still could take out my Sea King at that range, but at least now I don't have to worry about it hurting my Altaria.
I should probably get out of here.
Yeah, my chat is so small. I didn't even see that the king was approving my.
Oh, I should have expected that.
All right, so I do not.
This is
Outrun
farm
Cast to
material
see
for my
this.
Skuntank, so that's okay.
How do you feel about this version of the flying charge move game? Oh man, Meganium in the back. At least I have a shield, so this is easy peasy. Do I even bother?
Well, I misplayed this terribly.
Oh, and that's the other thing is on the battle simulator. Do you ever intend to do something to update it from the old tapping style animation to something else?
Oh, I mean, ideally, I'd like to get the um, charge move mini games in there, but that's kind of lower on the list. Well, I made some very little progress towards rank 7. We'll get there.
Hey, what do you think about in the current situation with the way the game is bugged? I know I heard FP Stick saying that he thought it was just way too risky to play with things that had 4-turn fast moves. Do you think that there's any general takeaway people can have in terms of what they should or shouldn't run until they fix that?
The general advice, yeah, would probably be avoid four turn fast moves if you can. Tap slower. Um, yeah, it's not ideal. Um, I'm not left-handed, but for whatever reason, I throw curveballs clockwise.
Or are they
A
judging
lot of
you?
yeah.
I think.
I know
Oh,
a lot of people throw them counterclockwise, but there's a reason it's called counterclockwise is called counterclockwise and not clockwise, if you see what I mean.
yes.
So I could be running into Go Battle League with this
That's right. He could
normal
be
cast
going in with
form.
normal cast form, just a
You could make that happen.
disgusting Pokemon. But can I tap down? Yes. Oh, but what's left? What's left? I don't even remember. Oh, it's Hypno. Can I still tap down? Wow, I tapped down the Scarm and the Hypno, leaving them with a shield. Feels
Oh
bad.
wow, yeah. Hey, that team is doing some work.
New gold. That Best Buddy Rainy Cast has got some bulk behind it. I have to blame your site for me investing in it because I was doing one of those matrix things and I was just like, why is this one the only one that gets this matchup and it's just as good as all the rest of them? And then I'm like, oh, that's my only one that needs to be Best Buddy boosted. And it's a gem.
Wonderful. I wish I had one that good.
You could always input it on your simulator, I suppose.
I can experience it that way.
Do you ever think anymore that there are Pokemon that are truly beyond hope after seeing what happened with Lock On and the Reggies?
Ooh, we got a Vigoroth. That's not ideal. I would like to switch here. Thank you.
Man, if I could get back to Rainy Cast here.
This is probably a Shadow Ball Hypno if they're switching it into my D-Axis.
Do you find people make more misplays against your Deoxys because they discount the possibility of Psycho Boost?
Yeah, I've nuked some like Venusaur and Toxicroak. Actually, the most important. I don't think I'm going to shield at all here. The most important matchup for that are the Mud Boys. You basically spend the whole matchup, countering and rock sliding, and they think they're safe. And then you get to the end and double Psycho Boost them. All right, so I'm up a shield. This can work out fine if I build up some energy with Skuntank.
Oh man, they got me. Well, maybe not. I mean, Sea King performs well against the Azumarill, but I think with shields down, I'm going to have a hard time putting myself in the situation I need to be in to have this Icy Wind to throw at Meganium. Are there any moves in the game that you think, from the standpoint of somebody who sims it a lot, are fundamentally broken and ought to be nerfed?
Ooh, I think like changing lock on to a 2-turn move would probably be a decent adjustment. Although it would drastically change Registeel's play style.
What do you think that methodology might be behind the way that they actually come up with these move changes, because we saw, speaking of King and Chet, when like they released Lock On and literally they were changing it on the fly, where they were just like, they released it and then they're just like, yeah, it's a little bit too
Right.
much,
That was
and then they
yeah.
kind of changed it. Like,
At least they're paying attention and they do care about the balance of the game.
yeah. And do you tend to run a stat weighted or an attack weighted, or some other variant of Altaria, if you're just running like a generic matchup and it's not something you've been able to sim?
My Altaria has a little bit of attack weight, and that Dragon Breath breakpoints can be pretty unexpected,
Right.
but when you hit them, they're pretty good. Like Azumarill is a matchup you can hit a Dragon Breath breakpoint against and basically double your fast move damage, which doesn't save you, but um, shields up, you can potentially wiggle out of some situations.
If you were to look at different mons on a whole, the ones that are like extremely IV dependent, or the ones that are just not IV dependent at all, do you think that there's a general pattern that you can see to those? Does it just have to do with the moves that they have, or what do you think tends to make that happen? Because I know like the ones that I've seen are like Zweilous is insane how IV dependent it is, and
Yeah, yeah.
Sentret to some extent, and you just look at that, and like Mina, and how you need just like an insane rank one just to do the things that you wanted it to do in Ferocious Cup. But more often than not, it's not a big deal. But what would be a way to kind of tell people who don't truly want to get into every little detail, like which mons are actually worth checking out and which ones you should just be like, yeah, it's good enough?
Ooh, that's a great question. My advice for that would also apply to Best Buddy Boost too. Generally, Pokemon with one-turn moves like Dragon Breath, Lick, or Water Gun are going to be breakpoints are a bigger deal for them because their damage is being multiplied. Like a breakpoint for them could be a 25% or 33% increase in damage. So anything with that. And for bulk points, Pokemon that are high HP, low defense, like Wigglytuff. Um, well, let me think about that for a moment. I guess it wouldn't make too much of a difference. Um, actually, the reverse is probably more impactful. So if you have high defense and low HP, bulk points are a bigger deal against you because you have a smaller pool of HP to draw from.
Does Kakuna have any significance to you other than the punniness of it? Do you just, or probably not at the time, but since then maybe you've grown some fondness for it?
Yeah. Yeah, since then I've enjoyed it quite a bit. All right, here's where I should start to think about
Trying to see
the
what YTX is asking. Any future plans to update the battle rating to factor in remaining energy?
uh-huh. Um
I mean, that's always something where what if you export the CSV, you get that information, but it's probably just not as easily digestible as multiple numbers sometimes. I guess that would be the. I don't know. I guess, yeah, there's not. I don't think there's really a way to do that without kind of just changing what it is, if that makes sense.
um ooh, right. It's way earlier there were some ideas of scoring battles based on turns to win. So instead of like, um, hey, you survived this particular battle with 50 HP remaining, it's, um, hey, uh, you beat them 2 turns before they would beat you.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes battle rating can be a little misleading like that, where it's like an 800 battle rating. Oh, that looks really good. But actually, they were 1 turn away from like a.
Casey wants to know how you got so OP. I'm sure that there's an objective answer to that, right?
I got good.
All right, fair enough. What is your favorite planet? Casey also wants to know.
Ooh. Jupiter. I'll go with Jupiter. There's a lot of
That's a good
interesting stuff
call.
about Jupiter.
Those storms, just the visuals. Can I get this?
Got lots of moons.
That's right.
Big red spot. Lots to like. Top tier planet for sure.
Top tier. What would have been your favorite and least favorite Sylph metas?
Oh, okay, that's a great question. Twilight. That's the easy answer. Um, what did I play a ton of? I thought Sinister was pretty fun. Least favorite. I think.
Will they see Drill Run coming?
Will they? Oh, that's right. King Joe wasn't. Timeless. Timeless was.
Oh, are they correcting me again? They always have to. They have to correct me every time.
Yeah, I liked Fusion a lot too. That was a good one. It's like 3 or 4 weeks in, and I still haven't figured out Forest.
Yeah.
I mean, also, let's see. Ferocious was rough for me because I didn't have a last resort Umbreon. At the PvP house in LA, I'm pretty sure we had a line of last resort Umbreons evolving.
I was disappointed when I saw that where Glaceon made the list on your I think it was Master. It was either Master League or Ultra League that that Last Resort was not viable. I was just like, I made all of these Last Resort Glaceons, and now I have to break them.
Right. Yeah, Glaceon's an interesting one where you might not necessarily need Last Resort because most stuff that resists ice resists Last Resort too.
Let's see. Casey also wants to know what your least favorite Pokemon to run into in GBL are.
Well, with the team I'm running now, Stunfisk, not a fan. uh, and I would say Stunfisk. Mudboys of any kind are a little tricky. Mudboy leads especially.
I think you promised in your tweet that you would address who is the best mud boy on stream,
I
right? I mean,
did.
it
I
seems
did.
like you're gonna have to
I've
give
been
an answer on that.
I've been dancing around that question all night. I was hoping you wouldn't bring it up.
It's kind of
Um,
uncomfortable, I know.
I sound uncomfortable. My answer is Whiscash. I think um, having the mud bomb between mud bomb and blizzard, I think it's overall a really versatile pick. Um, and yes, you can make the case for Swampert. Swampert's great. I do love Swampert. But I think Whiscash and the stash is where it's at. Those are my feelings at 1 in the morning. Yes, you can run both. I did run some triple mud boy preseason.
So I take it based on your lack of enjoyment over the shadows that you don't have too many to fall back on.
I don't. Okay, I think I will make it to Rock Slide and a Psycho Boost. They probably have, if they have Shadow Mawile in the back, Azumarill should be able to take care of it. Oh, get there. Ah, oh gosh. Damn it. God damn it. Oh, okay. This is
Shadow
fine.
Entei.
This is fine.
Don't see that a lot.
I'll just build up to an Ice Beam. Well, they had style. You can't doubt that.
There are people that love those triple shadow teams. Oh man, did I miss 4 minutes ago? R44 was dropping a bunch of subs in stream somehow. 4 minutes ago. Thank you, R44. I think I must have turned the notifications off. I think I did that for the interview streams to try and have a slightly cleaner feed to edit. But thank you so much, R44, for the gifted subs.
That's awesome.
Looks like Shagness got hit amongst others. Lola. Spending some time on Shagness' stream earlier. Always a good time.
Mm-hmm.
How much time do you spend on the streams these days?
I'm everywhere. I try to be anyway. It's how much the scene has exploded is just awesome.
Now, I know you're a proponent of the Wild Charge Mew now that it has the possibility, right?
Yeah.
Do you have it on your own personal Mew, or is that a secret that we don't get to know?
I have not bothered to touch my my Mew. Okay. It just sludge waved me. That's fine. So what I'm gonna do is, oh, okay. I was gonna switch anyway.
Did you find yourself inclined to say the words "that's fine" until you ran into Toshi and the rest?
This is fine. I found myself saying the phrase like "to be honest" a lot suddenly, just out of nowhere. And then it wasn't until later when I was watching King's videos that's where I realized where I picked it up from.
As a coder, what sort of a coding rig do you have? Do you work off a serious desktop with multiple monitors? Do you do the laptop thing? What's your tools of choice?
I built a PC of 4 years ago or so, um, and that's mainly what I work from. I only have one monitor, which is pretty sacrilege.
It is. I agree.
Uh,
Like I said, I need a third. Did
I
you
guess I've got some old ones lying around.
did you hone your coding and did you go to school for computer science or did you just pick it up?
Yeah, I my degree was in ooh, good. Uh, oh, what now is it called? Web and digital media design, something like that. Um, but it was a mix of coding and like production. Um, so I've been programming for a long time, and that was one of my passions. And lucky enough to go to school for it and get a job for it.
Are you I presumably your job is not impacted a whole lot by I mean I guess it's probably impacted more on the demand side than it is on the way you actually do your job, right? In this
Thankfully,
town.
yeah. I'm lucky enough to be able to work from home pretty much normally. Oh,
Are there any particular beverages or snacks that you like to partake of for either PvP or for coding sessions to keep yourself awake?
I I wish I had more snacks around. Let's see, my go-to snack. I'm a big fan of late night cereal.
Oh man, a man after my own heart.
My cereal of choice would be Honey Bunches of Oats.
All right.
Right now, I'm stocked up on Cheerios, so
Cheerios are good. Yeah, do you
right there
have
with me.
knowledge or opinions on Mio?
And um,
It sounds like you don't know what it is, which
no, I
is
don't. I'm
common.
unfamiliar.
How do you feel about the time limit in the game and how it's impacted by all the different weirdness with lag and charge moves and stuff?
Well, it's not ideal. Not not ideal. Um, it's unfortunate that it's happening at a time when the game should hopefully be growing a lot. Um, Hopefully they get that fixed soon. The lag in particular is um, yeah, it's tough, particularly at a time when I think the rate at which people are battling right now is probably much higher than they were expecting
Right.
because we don't have a walking limit.
Do you have ethical problems with the taking advantage of people lagging?
I'll like if somebody freezes, I'll wait a little bit for them to get back in. Um, I mean, you really can't ask them not to. It's not their fault it's happening, but
Right.
it'd be nice. It's good. It's good sportsmanship. I mean, I don't think you can expect that from everybody.
Standard, crinkle cut, waffle, or curly fries?
Oh, ooh, okay. Um, Curly fries are pretty good.
And is Licky Licky still in your rotation for things that you like to use, or was it just that one quick team that you made and you don't really use it a whole lot?
That was once, but how about we use it right now?
Oh, nice. Are you a good move counter?
Yeah, I'd say I do some of it by instinct. Even though I'm Team Mystic, but you you take what you can get.
Anything that you personally would like to see in a Sylph meta, whether it's because something is underrepresented or just because you think it would be cool that we haven't seen yet?
Um, let's see. That's a great question. Um, well, I've been waiting for Zangoose.
Huh.
Oh my God.
Hydro pumping AC King. I guess with a limited set of options.
Well, my game is just lagging galore here. Ugh. I'm not gonna two shield. I can take it.
Man,
Wow, this is bad. This is real bad. All right, I'll hit the mud or bone club before they get too bad. Sumeral, it's not ideal. I'm gonna come in with Charm here. Well, I could have come in with Amok too. It would have nuked it. I can take this too. This is fine. That's fine.
You say you didn't have a smartphone until the about when the game was released. What kind of phone do you use now?
It is a S7.
What's your dust count sitting at?
Um, 2.8 million.
Nice. Is that are you somebody who prides themselves on keeping reserves, or that's just where it's at?
I'm very picky about spending dust. So I managed to save a bunch.
What's the lowest you've been in recent memory?
I was down to, I think, below two, close to 2.5 um, at the end of season one. Powering a bunch of stuff up.
If there were what Pokemon you were most excited for to come out in the future in like the upcoming gens?
Oh, yeah. Jellicent. Or you've been talking about Jellicent
Right.
forever. But Jellicent. It's going to be awesome.
I feel like there are like stone tablets somewhere where like King was etching Jellicent on them like before YouTube was even a thing, and just he foretold that Jellicent would come, and it hasn't.
Someday.
And they want to know if you've seen Uncut Gems, which I think would also probably likely fall into the category of you haven't seen many movies. But
No, I have not seen Uncut Gems. I have not.
all right. Well, I definitely appreciate you spending all of this time with us. We almost made the 4-hour mark, which I think could be considered torture in some jurisdictions on the Jiggly stream. But hope to talk to you again in the future. And it was a pleasure having you on, sir.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for watching. Find all my archived interviews here on YouTube. and my live interviews at twitch.tv/JigglyDad. Find out about upcoming interviews, ask questions of my guests, and everything else Jiggly at JigglyDad on Twitter.